Please turn to page 150. We are now at Narrative Writing, Stage 4. In this manual, Stage 4 is on pages 150 to 154. Let's review those 4 pages so that you can see what's on them. First of all, we always begin with a chant on page 150, and this chant is going to be story opening, then actions, 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 where the character will do, say, or think until the story's done. I'll come back to that and I'll rehearse it with you and we'll go through each part a little slowly. I just wanted to show you what that is. So now we have Stage 4, story opening. We had learned that in Stage 3, actions, actions, actions. That was in Stage 3 as well, where we were now mandating that we had some transitions, not in every sentence, where the character will do, say, or think. This is our new teaching point here, and that is where we're going to actually add dialogue, where we will use quotation marks. So we're going to add that dialogue with punctuation. And then finally, the story is done. When we do the story is done, you're going to find that we will have a secret formula for that. So our secret formula is SC arrow at the beginning, and then at the end of our story, the story closing, the story is done, we're going to have TCR, transition, character, reflection. And again, I will go through all this in detail as we go through the lesson. So we know now, we have our story opening. We learned SCRO in Stage 3, actions, 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 with transitions if needed. But we now need to add do, say, or think so that we can add dialogue with quotation marks. And then the story is done. That will be our new teaching, TCR, transition, character, reflection, to add a sophisticated ending to our story. On page 151 are your at-a-glance steps. So you have your story opening, your actions, 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 and the story is done. You have all the steps for those 3 parts of the story. That's what we're going to follow as we walk through our lesson. Now let's look at the next pages. On pages 152 and 153, we have at the top of 152 the descriptors, exactly what are we going to be teaching when it comes to content and organization at the sentence level and for mechanics in the Stage 4 lesson. So you have that outlined, which I spoke of earlier with the chant. You also have your narrative writing Stage 4 chart that you could make. As you can see behind me, I have a sample of that chart, and you have on the page what it looks like in full detail. The story opening is green, the actions are yellow, and the story is done is blue. So again, the color coding stays the same. We're just increasing the sophistication, the rigor of their writing within this Stage 4 format. Right next to it is a sample of an organizer, what an organizer story would look like. Notice on this story we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sentences. You never know how many sentences are in a story because you're writing it for meaning, not telling the children how many they need. So this story went on until the kids felt like it was done. And then finally on page 153, from their organizer, they were orally rehearsing it and then they were writing it out. And this is a sample of the student writing. So we reviewed all 4 pages in your manual for Stage 4 of narrative writing. So now we're on page 151 so that you have the at-a-glance steps, your teacher at-a-glance steps to follow as we walk through these steps to form a story. Start with a blank piece of legal size paper. Fold the paper, so when you give this to the students, just take a big old stack, fold it so they already have the fold, and you can do these whole group lessons. Up here on the top is going to be our story opening, then we have actions, actions, actions till the story's done. Remember, you may have a lot of actions, so just turn over to the back side if you need more action boxes, and you just keep going until your story is done. The tools that we will use are going to be our do, say, and think for the actions in our story. We will also have our 5 senses or emotions or personality of a character cards for fancy words. You'll have your salt and pepper shaker to add when you have the fancy words, the adjectives. And also we have emotion cards we could choose if we need to help to come up with what happens next in the story. So now let's walk through our steps. So first thing we do is we say our chant. We're going to be writing a narrative story at stage 4. So we have story opening, then actions, 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 where we do, say, or think until the story's done. What are all the parts? Story opening, then actions, 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 where you do, say, or think until the story's done. So now we know over here on our paper we have our story opening. So on our teacher at a glance, you have your story opening steps, your action steps. Notice you have do, say, or think added, and then the story is done. And now we will also be using our secret formula TCR for this stage 4 when our story is done. Over here on our organizer, we're going to go to step 1, get organized. So we're in the story opening, step 1, get organized. Secret formula time. We already know this secret formula because we learned it in stage 3. So the kids are going to write SC arrow. Then we're going to go to step 2, character. Who's in our story? A person, an animal, or I am. I've written imaginative stories for the last stages, so I figured I would do a personal narrative because these steps work for a personal narrative or imaginative narrative. It really doesn't matter. So what you can do is you can have different kids tell things that have happened to them, and then you can choose one of the children's story, and then you can use that story whole group for the kids to write down. And I always say, if we're going to use someone's story, do we care? No. Why? Because this lesson is what we're using to learn how to write stage 4, to learn the steps. We don't care about the story. We care about having a good story, but we don't care if we use someone else's story for our personal narrative because we are learning the steps. So we go like this. Once we learn the steps, we can write our own story. That's right. So now we have our step 1, SC arrow, setting character action. And I tell the kids, boys and girls, we're going to write a personal narrative and we need our story opening. But before we start, we have to figure out what is a personal narrative. So a personal narrative is a true story. So I make the letter T, about myself. That's memorable. And then we all do that together. What's a personal narrative? A personal narrative is a true story about myself. That's memorable. So we're ready to write our story opening, but we can't do that. If it's a true story about ourselves, that's memorable. We have to figure out, well, what's our true story? And what does memorable mean? Well, memorable means something happened to us that was true that made us have an emotional reaction. So we may be writing about something that happened to us that really scared us, or made us really happy, or made us sad, or made us proud. So we're looking at something real that happened to you that gave you that emotional reaction. So then you'll have all the kids talk. Sometimes you may just want to share one that you come up with and they use your story. So this is a story I had heard the other day in a classroom, and one of the kids was talking about how he was out camping with his family and he was running around the woods and he was running around trees and climbing over rocks, and then he landed in a bush when he jumped over a rock. And what happened was his leg got stuck in some branches that got all tangled up in there. So when he was trying to pull it out, it wouldn't come out. So he's screaming and yelling, and his dad heard him. So his dad came and got him, and his dad's trying to pull him out, and it wouldn't work. And his dad had to pull the branches apart, and finally his leg came out. And he was so thankful his dad was strong enough to do that, that's for sure. So he told his story, everyone listened, and then I always have the kids clap afterwards. We go, lovely, lovely. Now we're going to take your story that you told, and we're going to use our steps, our story opening, actions, and the story is done steps in order to write it out. So the only difference between an imaginative story and a personal narrative, teachers, is that the personal narrative is something that happened, so you tell the story to refresh yourself. Oh, this is what happened. Now you go back and you follow the same steps in order to write it out. So what's the first part of our story? Story opening. Step 1, get organized. Setting, character, action, and we write that down. Step 2, character. Who's in the story? Who's doing the action right at the beginning? I am. So even though that boy told the story, all of us are going to pretend like we were the one who had been stuck in the bush. So we all write I on our organizer. Now we go back and we say setting. When and where did this story happen? When did this happen? And the boy says, oh, well, it happened to me early in the morning. I was running around early in the morning. So let's make a sun come up, like the sun's coming up. One morning. And now, where did it happen? Oh, down by the lake. I was over at the lake. My family and I were camping over at the lake. So let's make a lake there. And look how we're making quick, simple drawings. You never want to write out a ton of words on an organizer, because then what do the kids do? They spend all their time writing words instead of thinking of ideas. And then you'll have different kids going, I'm not done, I'm not done. Simple, quick drawings. And I do a whole thing where I go, oh, look how I'm making a simple drawing. See my sun? I just made a simple sun and I did it quickly, because that would be embarrassing to take a long time making an art project. This is writing. We all know that. We would never spend a long time drawing it out. Never. How embarrassing. Now let's go ahead and draw our sun quickly. Look how quickly everyone's drawing it. So I always do that. I set it up so you don't have kids taking forever with the drawings. We have our setting and our character. What do we do once we have our setting and character? We're going to rehearse the sentence and act it out. So let's pretend like the sun is rising. So we go like this. One morning, down at the lake, ready everyone? One morning at the lake, so you notice every time I say it, I may say it a little differently. It doesn't matter as long as it makes sense and it sounds right. Go to our last step, action. What was I doing one morning down at the lake? And then we may ask the boy again and he's saying something like, oh, I was running around. Now, I want to make this sentence a little more sophisticated. Instead of just saying I was running in the woods again, then we would say woods again, and it just is sort of a boring opening. So I want kids, instead of telling, I want them to show. I want them to have the reader really see them in the woods running. So I may say something like, okay, go to the woods when you were running. Did you run around something? Did you run over something? Did you climb things? Did you crawl into things? What were you doing? And he's like, oh, I ran around trees. Okay, let's draw a tree. So let's put an arrow around the tree. So you ran around a tree. What else did you do when you were in the woods, when you were running around? Oh, I climbed up rocks. So you climbed up a rock. Uh-oh. And then is that when you jumped off and you landed in the bush? Mm-hmm. And landed in a bush. So let's put that bush there. One morning at the lake, I ran around trees, climbed up rocks, and then jumped in a bush. We have our whole story. So now we go run around a tree, climbed up a rock, then, so you're not doing all these at the same time. I can't use the word and. If I use and, then I'm running around a tree, climbing a rock, and jumping into the bush at the same time. So I ran around trees, climbed up a rock, then jumped into a bush. There we go. So we're going to use our word then, so we can remember that.